disciples travel between cities, walk up mountains, cross the lake, and visit villages. Jesus teaches and heals people along the way as he guides his disciples to their final destination, the city of Jerusalem. Several times in Luke, we read that Jesus is on his way to the city. Jerusalem is at the heart of the gospel because here Jesus will die and rise again. Jerusalem is where the risen Jesus will appear to the disciples. Jerusalem is the place the disciples will start spreading the good news of Jesus to the entire world. The gospel is not only a journey to Jerusalem, but also a journey of faith. As you read Luke, you will hear different voices trying to figure out who Jesus is supposed to be. Religious leaders ask about Jesus' authority. Political leaders want to know Jesus' identity. Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, wants to know if Jesus is the long-awaited Christ. Even Jesus asks his disciples who they believe him to be. As readers, we already know the answer. When Jesus is born, we hear the angels tell the shepherds that Jesus is Christ the Lord, the Savior of the world. The journey through the rest of the gospel is to gain the confidence and knowledge that this is true for us. Chapter 1, verses 46 through 55. And Mary said, "My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, even as he has said to our fathers." So ends our reading.
Reading the final chapter of the book of Ruth this morning, and I'm reading from the Message, the Bible in Contemporary Language, translated by Eugene Peterson. Boaz went straight to the public square and took his place there. Before long, the closer relative, the one mentioned earlier by Boaz, rolled by. "Step aside, old friend," said Boaz. "Take a seat." The man sat down. Boaz then gathered 10 of the town elders together and said, "Sit down here with us. We've got some business to take care of." And they sat down. Boaz then said to his relative, "The piece of property that belonged to our relative Elimelech is being sold by his widow Naomi, who had just returned from the country of Moab. I thought you ought to know about it. Buy it back if you want it. You can make it official in the presence of those sitting here and before the town elders. You have the first redeemer rights. If you don't want it, tell me so I know where I'll stand. You're first in line to do this, and I'm next after you." He said, "I'll buy it." Then Boaz added, "You realize, don't you, that when you buy the field from Naomi, you also get Ruth the Moabite, the widow of our dead relative, along with the redeemer responsibility to have children with her and carry on the family inheritance." Then the relative said, "Oh, I can't do that. I jeopardize my own family's inheritance. You go ahead and buy it. You can have my rights. I can't do it." In the olden times in Israel, this is how they handled official business regarding matters of property and inheritance. The man would take off his shoe and give it to the other person. This was the same as an official seal or personal signature in Israel. So when Boaz's redeemer relative said, "Go ahead and buy it," he signed the deal by pulling off his shoe. Boaz then addressed the elders and all the people in the town square that day. You are witnesses today that I have bought from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech and Kilion and Mahlon, including the responsibility for Ruth the foreigner, the widow of Mahlon. I'll take her as my wife and keep the deceased alive in his inheritance. The memory and reputation of the deceased is not going to disappear out of this family or from his hometown. To all this you are witnesses this very day. And all the people in the town square that day, backing up the elders, said, Yes, we are witnesses. May God make this woman who is coming into your household like Rachel and Leah, the two women that built the family of Israel. May God make you a pillar in Ephrathah and famous in Bethlehem. With the children God gives you from this young woman, may your family rival the family of Perez, the son of Tamar, who that bore Judah. Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife. Boaz slept with her. By God's gracious gift, she conceived and had a son. The town women said to Naomi, Blessed be God, he didn't leave you without family to carry on your life. May this baby grow up to be famous in Israel. He'll make you young again. He'll take care of you in old age. And this daughter-in-law who has brought him into the world and loves you so much, why, she's worth more to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the baby and held it in her arms, cuddling him, cooing over him, waiting on him hand and foot. The neighborhood women started calling him Naomi's baby boy, but his real name was Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. This is the family tree of Perez. Perez had Hezron, Hezron had Ram, Ram had Aminadab, Aminadab had Nahshon, Nahshon had Solomon, Solomon had Boaz, Boaz had Obed, Obed had Jesse, and Jesse had David. Blessed be the reading and the hearing of the word of God, and the gathering of God's people. We've walked through this story, this very, very small story, just a short 4 chapters, a 10-minute read for most of us. We've been talking about it for over a month. Talked about it 3 Sundays before my vacation, and now we're finishing it up today. And in this small little story contains so much. We've talked about immigration in this. We've talked about women and their roles and their rights and how they were treated back then and today. We've talked about how to care for each other and the courage that you have to survive in this world. And today we're going to talk about a couple more things, just in this small little story. One is we're going to talk a little bit about property and how their economy functioned and what that had to do with God at the time. And then we're going to talk about why this matters so much in the whole book of the Old Testament. When Israel, back in Moses' time and Joshua's time, was going into the promised land, and they were getting all of the new commandments in which to live, they were told that of those 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, which represented the 12 sons of Jacob, and they would be distributed evenly all through the land. And so everybody would have a fair portion of their inheritance from God of the promised land. And then every 50 years, every seventh generation, or 7 times 7 years, every 49, 50 years, to make sure that everybody would not get too rich or too poor, they would have everybody go back to their original land. And all debts would be wiped clean, so that everybody would have a piece of their land, everybody could start over, and That was their welfare system. Now, even though it was commanded to do this, there is no instant in the Bible where this actually happened. Before this time in the Bible, during Judges and Joshua, and afterwards in 1st and 2nd Samuel and Kings, and there's no time where they really said, okay, everybody, we're proclaiming the year of Jubilee, the year of the Lord's favor. You've heard that before? That's what it means, that everybody goes back to what they originally started with. The year of the Lord's favor, the year of Jubilee. And everybody, once again, gets lifted up. So nobody's too rich and nobody's too poor. Because the land is God's and we're just leasing it from Him anyway. But out of this law, there's little subsection A's and 1.25.3 subsection B. And out of that is that if a husband dies and there are no sons to take over the land, their nearest relative has to watch over that land and take care of that family until there is a male. And we talked a little bit about this. So that when finally there's someone who can inherit the land becomes theirs again. So this nearest relative said, oh yeah, I'll buy the land. I'll take care of the land, you know. And he's thinking, all right, more land for me. Now the kids are going to have more land to inherit. Until Boaz said, well, there is Naomi and Ruth, and you'll have to marry Ruth, and you'll have to take care of the land. It'll be your money, your sweat, you're buying the land, but then when they're old enough, then you have to give it to her children, and you and your sons and your family will have no inheritance in it. And so he made a quick calculation in his head. If I give this big chunk of money over here, will I have enough to take care of my family? And he decided, no, I do not have enough to buy this land and take care of it for 10, 15, 20 years and then hand it over to them and have enough for my retirement, for my family, for my kids and grandkids. So he says, I relinquish my rights to redeem this land, to redeem it for their family, to redeem it according to our ways. Boaz, you may have it. And so Boaz, who was doing this the proper way, who asked his nearest relative to sit down with him, who went out and got some elders to witness this, because at this time there was no government, there was no county courthouse records, there was no judges and lawyers and all that. There was just the elders. And so he brought the elders of the community together and said, you are witnesses to this action that we are about to take. We're going to go into business together or not. And this needs to be witnessed so everybody knows that this is an open transaction and that you will honor it from this day forward. That I will honor it, that they will honor it, that the community will recognize it. And so he says, you are the witnesses to what is happening here. It is your job to make sure that I stand by my word, that they stand by their words, that all is up and up so no one can come back and say, well, I know we agreed to this, but we're going to do this instead. And instead of signing a contract, and I have no idea, I didn't look this up too much about, instead of signing a contract, you took off your shoe and handed it to the person. And said, okay, we got a deal. It's not done with a handshake, it's done with the handing of a shoe. The reason I can think of is back then is they didn't have signed documents and stuff like that, and they're like, And the guy goes, well, I didn't sell the land. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. Well, why does he have your shoe then? Did he steal it from you in the middle of the night, or did you guys have an agreement? So it's a physical sign that there is business being transacted. And then the witnesses are supposed to make sure that the details are followed through. So after Moses brought him out, after Joshua brought him into the promised land, after they settled the land, they had judges, they had tribal leaders, they had elders who took care of the business. And so that's the Bible before, book of the Bible before is Judges, then it's Ruth, and then it's 1 Samuel. And shortly into 1 Samuel we have, here is, the tribes are looking around and they're like, well, they have kings and they have armies. Why are we just so backwards? Well, we only have judges and elders and priests. Why don't we have what they have? We want to have armies. We want to have castles. We want to have a government just like everybody else. And so they started, God tried to talk them out of it through Samuel, so they anointed Saul to be their first king. And we know the story that Saul wasn't much of a great king, so they had called the 7 sons of Jesse to come before, and he says, one of these is going to be the son. So they brought in all the big, young, strapping men, and and the God says, nope, that's not going to be, that's not going to be, that's not going to be, that's not going to be. There's one more. And he said, well, do you have another son? Oh yeah, but he's just a little scrawny kid. He's out taking care of the sheep. We didn't think he was going to be needed here. They said, bring him in. And so they brought him in. God said, this is going to be the next king, David. Now David is the son of Jesse, is the son of Obed, is the great-grandson of Boaz. And why this matters, and one of the things about this story is that we kind of clan together. We kind of tribe together yet today. I mean, they don't look like us, and they don't talk like us, and they don't pray like us, so we're going to have this group over here, or they're in that nation, and they do those things, so we're not going to like them. But we generally agree in this world that all human beings are made by God, that we're all have a connection to each other. We're all created in God's image. But back then, when there are many gods and there are many tribes and there are many different ways, not only are they speak a different language, but they worship a different God, and they were created, and they're not like us at all. So there's lots of fear and distrust and hate between tribes and nations. Even more rampant. A lot more rampant than it is today. And if you look in Judges, and if you look in the First Kings, Israel often went to war with the Moabites, with the country of Maon. They didn't like those people. They were always fighting with us. They're always killing from us. They're always making bad things happen for us. But here we have the greatest king in Israel, King David. And in this short little story, yes, he can trace lineage all the way back to Father Abraham. He is a true son of Israel. But his great-grandmother was a Moabite, was a foreigner. So he didn't have true, pure Jewish blood. So that story tells us, this small little story, this story of 4 little chapters, tells us that the greatest king that Israel ever saw was not a true son of Israel in terms of that all of his relatives came from Israel, that he had foreign blood in him. And yet he still was the greatest king of Israel. As I said, there is no big miracles in this. Nobody dies and is brought back from the dead. There is talk of in the book of Ruth about how there's famines, and they believe that God is in control of everything, so God caused this famine here, so they moved, and then God caused this famine here, so they moved back. And what the center of this story is, how it moves along, is individual people standing up and saying, I promise to take care of you. And the first was Ruth, with her mother-in-law Naomi. After Naomi's husband died, after Ruth's husband died, and her brother-in-law died, she says, I will take care of you. I will be with you. I will go where you go. I will die with you, God. Die. Your God will be my God. Then they come back in to their hometown. And the people see past her foreignness, her otherness, and see her heart that she loves Naomi and that she's doing all she can to take care of Naomi. And Boaz sees this and it draws him to her. He shows her respect. He shows her care. He wants to help Naomi and her daughter-in-law, Ruth. And so he goes and calls the village together and says, you are witnesses to this. If this nearest relative will not redeem her and her family and their lineage, so that they may be remembered, so that they may continue, rather than being just enveloped by another family and just added on as slaves, I will take care of them. I will be with them. And I will, once the time comes, and Ruth's son is old enough to take over the business, I will step back and allow him to do so. No strings attached. And these small acts, but these courageous acts of kindness, of courage, of love, a couple generations later, we get this young man who becomes king, who probably heard this story of how his great-grandmother met his great-grandfather, how his great-grandmother took care of his great-great-grandmother. And of the 7 sons that Jesse had, he was the one that took it into his heart and said, we have to take care of it. So as he took care of his sheep, and as he took care of his family, God Even though he was the youngest, God said, this is the one I want to take care of my nation, the nation of Israel. So it is by our small acts of compassion, courage, care, loving, selflessness that we are starting something that we don't even know yet. And maybe some of you have those stories in your families about how some family, somehow some ancestor was being taken care of, was being helped out. And you pass that down to your kids and say, this is who we are. This is how we got to be here. When we as parents and grandparents help out in the community and take care of each other and feed other people, our children see that. And more often than not, they will do that when they are old. And some of the people we help will tell that story and says, I was in a desperate situation and this family helped my family, and so that is why we help others, so they can have the chances that we have. And only God knows what those simple acts of kindness, of courage, of compassion will do, how they will grow, how they will bear fruit. But this is what God calls us to do. This is what God shows us will happen in the story of Ruth. Amen.